Hello, this is Professor Kim Nelson with the Jewelry Design Department at the Fast Institute of Technology, doing a tutorial for JD139 Jewelry Ideation. Just want to go over some basics of working in Painter into Stylus as we had gone through in class. Your homework assignment is going to be to do some writing, a paragraph or so. I need at least a paragraph a week. Paragraph has to at least be 5 or 6 sentences. I would recommend doing it every day until your handwriting looks like your own handwriting. So let's start with how we set up a brush. Now this is my personal copy. I have saved brushes that I've created. We won't be doing that because the lab's IT wipes the machines every 24 hours. The brushes won't survive anyway. So we'll talk about how to create a brush from scratch. But before we do anything, let's create paper, or in Painter they call it a canvas. To create a canvas, you go File, New, and then you set a size. Now 7.5 by 10 is the maximum you can do for a 8.5 by 11 print. But for class exercises, I recommend making it 6 by 6 by 300 pixels per inch. Okay. Now yours might say pixels here. You may have an odd number. If this says pixels, change it to inches and hit OK. Be aware that you can come into Painter Settings, Edit, Preferences, Interface, and you can set the workspace units to inches. That can be very helpful, so I recommend you do that. Okay? So now you have your canvas. While we're on the canvas, let's go ahead and create a grid. So you'll go to the Canvas menu now, and you'll select the grid option. On the pop-out there are 3 further commands: Show Grid, Snap to Grid, and Grid Options. The default is to have the grid turned off but Snap to Grid turned on. I don't know why that is. We're going to reverse it. We're going to show the grid and take Snap off. So first thing you do is Show Grid. By default you get an itty bitty tiny fine-grained grid, which is not going to be useful for what we're doing. So we're going to go in and change the nature of that. Before we do that, though, we'll turn off Snap to Grid. Come back one more time. Grid Options. Okay. Now, whatever it says here, we don't care about the bottom, just these top 2. It isn't going to be accurate. Painter brings us information in flawed every time. So what we want to do is change this to something other than it is. Doesn't matter what. Let's make it centimeters. And then change it back to inches. Once you do that, you'll get an actual dimension of what that is. This will be an accurate number. Make it 0.5. You can make it 0.3, whatever you like. Hit OK. And you'll get a much looser grid that's a lot more useful to work with. Let's try setting it down to 3/10 and see how that looks. Okay. Fortunately, it hasn't corrupted yet, so the number is still accurate. If the number didn't say 0.5, you'd have to go through and toggle it back off of inches and then back onto inches. That's nice. That works well. Okay, so we have our canvas, we have a grid. We don't have it set to snap to the grid. That's been unchecked. Now we're going to create our brush. So your brush tool, these are your tools here on the side. This is your brush tool. When you click on that, it activates the brush. So we want that, but we also want to set the tool itself. And to do that, you have a little brush dialog here. If you click on the blue triangle, you get a pop-out panel. Okay? And we have several different kinds of brush tools. My interface may look a little different than yours. Mine is Painter 12 and yours is Painter 13. But in principle, it's the same. If I click on this, I've now dealing with chalks. And so if I start to draw with that chalk, I have that tool available to me. Control Z is undo. It's also on your edit menu, undo, but I just use the standard Windows shortcut of Control Z. We want pencils. So we're going to come back to the pencils. Okay? And we want a 2B pencil. This will be the basic pencil for all of our work in class. Alright? So, we have a 2B pencil. We need to set its attributes. To set its attributes, we go to Window, Brush Control Panels, General. Okay? Now yours is going to look a little different. It doesn't have this information over here. We need to access that information a little deeper in the interface in Windows 13. But this is here, this is here. These things are still here. You want it to be a circular brush, single stroke. Method, okay, you want cover. So if it says build up, for example, change it to cover. And the subcategory we want to take from flat cover to grainy soft cover. Alright? And the source is set to color by default. Painter has what are called cloning brushes, and if you had one of those active, you could choose where to draw the color from, but this is a standard brush. Remember from our discussion in class that the main thing I want to do is make this brush as fast as possible. Okay? So I'm taking away all of the expressive qualities of the brush, really, in order to make it fast. So I am going to come to opacity, and it says expression equals pressure. That means the harder I push, the more opaque the brush gets. I'm going to set it to none. Expression for grain, the harder I press, the thinner the grain gets, like a pencil filling in the paper. We don't want it. None. Okay? Play with multi-core. It depends on your computer. I leave it blank on my machine, but I can put it on multi-core if I want it. I just haven't found it makes a lot of difference. In theory, if you have a multi-core processor, it'll make your brush faster, which is what we want. And I do have a multi-core processor on this machine, so I'll take it back to multi-core and try it. I go back and forth with that. Alright? So we've done everything we can do on this panel, but what's important is that you have this shape, linear profile to your dab, and on your interface this isn't right here. You have to go deeper to find it. Okay? So to go deeper to find it, you go to, and by the way, if opacity isn't here or if grain isn't here, so you can make them none, okay, you can find those here. Brush panel windows. Okay, so this has the dab profile already selected. On your machines, on your software, dab profile is what you would select to pick that profile. Alright? So you would select this. You know, if I do that, it just takes it away. Because my dab profile looks different than yours. So come in and click dab profile, and then make sure you have the blunt point as your profile. Okay, I found it on here also at one point in here, but on yours it's down in here. Don't do that. Just go to the window, set dab profile, and click on that. Or if you see that down in the middle here, select it. But this is what you want. Dab profile set to the blunt point. Okay? So, brush is ready to use. Okay? There are a couple of other things. By the way, once you finish with the brush panel, click it now. You don't want to click that. That's the navigator. Click the dot associated with this, just so that we have more territory. Alright? So we have a brush, we have paper. Now we need to talk a little bit about interface. First thing, your brush probably doesn't look like this. Your brush probably looks, actually Painter 13 has a very strange brush. I believe the enhanced ghost brush is the default. Yes, which looks like this. And I find that to be really annoying, you know? A little magnifying glass. In your case, I think it's a long stick. I don't care for that at all. So, interface. We're going to turn off the enhanced brush stroke and go to regular brush ghost. We want to set it to single pixel. Actually, make sure, select iconic and select single pixel from here. It does make a difference. And then go back and hit brush ghost. Okay. Brush ghost means that it will show the actual size of the brush on your paper. So, for example, if I make this brush larger, the circle that it represents becomes larger. If I make it smaller, it becomes smaller, which is very helpful for figuring out what your brush is going to do. So now we have a brush, we have paper. I want to talk a little bit about your interface. To zoom in and out of Painter, you can go to Navigator here, and you can, if you just grab a hold of that arrow and then slide left or right, while you press down, it'll zoom in and out interactively. Okay. Another way you can do it is the typical Adobe shortcut of Control Spacebar and then click. And wherever you click, it'll zoom in. And if you hold down the Alt key, so it's Control Alt Spacebar, you can zoom back out. Okay. Just Spacebar gives you your hand, your grabber tool, which is located over here. But you can just hold down the spacebar and then press down and grab with your stylus. The magnifying glass is on here also, but get used to using shortcuts whenever you can. Shortcut to zoom in, Control Spacebar, and then click where you want to zoom to. To zoom out, Control Alt Spacebar, and zoom out. Or you can interactively grab here. I tend to not do that because I need that for other things, that area. I'll show you one of the things I use it for in just a minute. You can rotate your paper by grabbing this and then sliding. So if you like to draw at an angle, you can do that. Be cautious with this. I found in class that those computers aren't that powerful, and when Painter, if I keep calling this Rhino, forgive me, Painter needs to process that brushstroke information in real time, and part of that information is now going to be that the paper is tilted, which gives the software and your computer one more thing to calculate. And we started getting lags on the computer in class, and lag is the last thing we want. We don't want lag time. So if you can get used to drawing straight up and down, it's a good idea. I hate it myself. I like drawing at an angle. But it's also useful because if you ever start to work with a Cintiq tablet, which are the large screens that you can draw right onto, you can't, those are much harder to spin around, and it's good to be able to do this anyway, to make a long story short. So that's navigation. Let's talk a little bit about color. Okay, we have several options for color. Okay, this is the best. Now, let's see what we have. Color panel. Okay, there are two other panels. There's a mixer. Okay, in Painter 13, this is already up. This I don't find very useful. We can discuss how to use it in class, but I don't find it very useful. And the other one is a color sets. This is nice to pick. The best purpose for a color set is that you can create your own. Okay, so you can set a new color set. Like I have them set up for ruby and emerald and amethyst and gold and platinum. And that way you have the same colors to pick from every time, again and again and again. We'll discuss that later in the semester. But for now, the color wheel is your best tool. And the way this works, to get the most intense version of any color, you pull out to this far right hand triangle corner. Okay? You don't have to actually pull, you can just click there and it goes there. Okay? Then as you grab this little box and spin it around, you'll see this is the current color right here. You'll also see it over here. As you go around, that will change and update to match the color. Okay? If you click along the top rim of this triangle, these will be tints of that pure color with white mixed in. So in this case, various shades of pink. Up at this far corner is going to be white. White will say 255 in all three numbers. Okay? Clicking or dragging along the bottom edge gives you the shades of that color with black mixed in. All the way down to this end, numbers all reading 0 is black. Anything in the middle is that base color mixed with gray. So you can get various muted tonalities of the color. Some really beautiful things in here. Okay? This is the best way to pull colors in Painter. Now for our purposes, for drawing, we're going to work pretty much in black and white. However, drawing in black is really annoying. So I prefer to draw at about 59, about a fourth of the way up. I just find it to be less garish. So 59, 63, anywhere in here is fine. The other color should be white. So if there's another color already assigned, to flip these, you click on this little icon. Make sure that other color is white. The color in front is the current color. Now there is a keyboard shortcut for this, and that is Shift-X. So I hold down the Shift key with my pinky and then tap X with my index finger. It will go back and forth, which makes it easier when I'm drawing. Because if I do something I don't like, I can Shift-X back to white, and it acts as an eraser. Okay? Alright, more attributes. We have 3 more things to think about with your paper. With your brush. You have its size. That is this radio button here. Now you can click here and then come over here, but you don't have to. Actually, if you just grab and slide, it'll take it down. Size is a personal preference, and it depends on how far you're zoomed in, by the way. A 7 pixel brush is much bigger when you're zoomed in than it is when you're zoomed out. Okay? But there are some loose guidelines. You don't want to go down below a 2 pixel brush. That's about the smallest brush you want to use. Anything smaller than that, you have paper texture in Painter, and anything smaller than that becomes smaller than the texture, and it can start to break up. Alright? If you deactivate the texture, then if you do that, you can take it down to 1.4. 1.4 is really the smallest. 1 is really a nasty little brush. It doesn't work well. 1.4 pixels is about as small as you can go. The largest you want to go, it's going to be about 20 to 25. That's about the largest brush you're going to want to use in Painter. Because larger than this, you'll start to get some lag. It takes a lot of processor speed to keep up with. So unless you're filling in a big area, in which case I recommend you use a paint fill bucket. 20 to 25 is about the biggest brush you need. Okay. So now we'll talk about paper. Now I do have something happening here that is a little confusing to me. I should have here my brushes texture expression there. Even though I deactivated it in the main board, it should be there. Let's take a look. If I set this to pressure, no, it makes no difference. Alright, none. Alright, this percentage should show up here. Right now I have resaturation and bleed, which are actually not attributes I would affiliate with this brush. Okay, so I'm going to go, yeah, see, this is what you would normally get with that brush. Grain right here. And there it's back. See, Painter's buggy, I hate to say it, but it is. It was remembering the traits from the pastel chalk and it didn't update them. So if this happens and you're not seeing something you need, click on one of the other recent brushes or come into here if the only brush you've got is the 2B. Pick another pencil and then pick your 2B pencil back again and it'll give it back to you. Now it should stay the same. It should not change its attributes. During a work session, that brush should stay the same. Double check that by going to our window, brush panel controls, and you can see that none and none, this is all still the same. Okay, and it's still at the same size that I used last. Okay, so grain. Well, actually, let's talk about opacity first. Usually we want to draw with about 60% to 70% opacity. This is important because Painter is a fractal program. In fact, it used to be called Fractal Paint, which what it means is that it takes the pixels and it feathers them away at the edge. With a little bit of transparency, it also allows the color to build up in a more natural way. You'll see it gets darker each time I go over it. It allows us to get some of that expression back without having it slow the brush down as a setting. Okay, so just gives you more natural, softer line work. Only change in that is if I'm working with color later and I want hard facets or something, then I'll go to 90 or 100%. Grain. To talk about grain, we need to talk about paper. To do that, I'm going to turn on, it's already here. Okay. Paper libraries, right here. Okay. The current paper is basic paper. It's a rough paper, and you'll see it expressed as such. If I change that paper to the finest watercolor paper, you see I get a much softer texture. And I decide how much of that grain I want it to show. At 90% it shows a lot more. Okay. Usually I set grain to, once again, 60-70%. Alright. Grain is useful. It's not just neat because it looks like paper. It's useful because it helps you to blend. One of the challenges you face when you're drawing is to draw smoothly arced curves. And when you have the texture of the paper, it helps forgive sins. It helps cover mistakes. Okay? So it's nice to have texture of the paper. I only use these two. Basic paper and the soft press watercolor. Feel free to use as many as you want. Okay? But those are the two that I use. And the difference is, depending on how big the brush is, Anything over a 3.5, 4 pixel brush, I will use the coarse paper because it's my sketching paper. When I drop down below 3, I'm doing fine line work. Then I go to the finer paper. Okay? And that's it. That should get you started. Now what you want to do with this, okay, say I want to erase all this. Selection in Painter. You can just hit Control A. That selects everything. And then Control X. That deletes everything. I just undid that. You can also get a selection here, rectangular selection tool, drag a rectangle, and then you can hit clear if you don't want to use the shortcuts. The only other tool we'll use a lot will be the lasso, which allows you to draw a selected shape. Oops. Okay. Painter had a glitch. It does that. Okay, if I don't like the selection, I just click anywhere on the outside. That's true here, by the way, as well. If I just click on the outside of the selection, it goes away. The thing I wanted to show you that for some reason Painter didn't care to let me is that as you get to the end and you release, it will fill it in itself. Now it's really resisting this here, and I don't know why. So I'll start there. Yep, it just hated coming that direction. Like I said, I'm not saying it's the most stable or predictable animal. And erase. But those are your two selection tools. We'll talk more about layers and things later in the semester. So if I'm going to write, I'm going to activate the brush that I've made. I'm going to pick a size brush that makes sense to me. I'll keep it around 4. And I'll keep the coarse paper. And I'll begin to write. Alright. When you first start writing, you'll notice that you get very poor results. Alright? It's because you're not used to the interaction, the eye-hand coordination of looking up at the screen while you draw off to your right-hand side. Also, you're going to notice a certain amount of artifacts that happen at the end of lines as you lift up. This is a pressure-sensitive tablet. You're kind of on until you're completely off. There is lag. Even when I'm writing like this, I'm getting lag. I'm not getting enough that it bothers me, but there is a slight delay between the stroke and its appearance. So because of that, misspelled. It's a knack you have to get. You have to get a coordination of speed of wrist, angle of wrist, how you draw, and what you see on the screen. Once your handwriting looks like your own, you're good to go. Okay? So, this is the kind of thing I want you to do for your homework. Alright? That's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching.